We are convinced that most Christians do not fully understand the true nature of secular psychology. Modern psychology is clearly anti-Christian. It rejects God, ignores sin, deifies man, and frequently castigates Christianity, Christ, and the Bible as irrelevant or dangerous. Many of the most respected and influential pioneers in American psychology discovered it as the ideal means to scientifically discredit their own Christian upbringing. Indeed, empirical and anecdotal evidence suggests that psychology still attracts and encourages more persons indifferent to or hostile to religion than any other physical or social science. In fact, what psychiatrist Thomas Szasz says about medical psychiatry is true for secular psychology in general.
Medical psychiatry is not merely indifferent to religion, it is implacably hostile to it. Herein lies one of the supreme ironies of modern psychotherapy. It is not merely a religion that pretends to be a science, it is actually a fake religion that seeks to destroy true religion.
Any philosophical movement that seeks to destroy faith in God and His Word is not something that will ever be helpful to people with problems or to society at large, especially if it causes far more problems than it solves. In Psychology as Religion, New York University psychology professor Paul Vitz makes some dramatic statements about humanistic psychology, including the fact that
psychology as a religion is deeply anti-Christian. Indeed, it is hostile to most religions. Psychology as religion has for years been destroying individuals, families, and communities.
One reason for this destruction can be seen in Donald Campbell's presidential address to the American Psychological Association. He stated that modern psychology was more hostile to religiously based moral views than could be justified. Arguing that people's behavior does in fact need restraint, he pointed out that modern psychology and psychiatry, on the other hand, not only describe man as selfishly motivated, but implicitly or explicitly teach that he ought to be so. Dr. Campbell further commented,
"It is certainly my impression, after 40 years of reading psychology, that psychologists almost invariably side with self-gratification over traditional restraint.
If one examines the major founders, schools, and great thinkers of modern psychology, one usually discovers an anti-Christian bias which has colored almost all of the respective subsequent psychology. As Jacob Needman pointed out, modern psychiatry and psychology, in psychoanalysis or depth,
arose out of the vision that man must change himself and not depend for help upon an imaginary God.
In psychoanalysis or depth psychology we have founders Freud and Jung. Freud hated religion, especially the Christian religion, and he actively sought to destroy people's faith in the Christian God. For him, Christian faith was a personal neurosis and a social evil. He said,
"I regard myself as one of the most dangerous enemies of religion."
Freud considered religious beliefs illusions and referred to religion as the obsessional neurosis of humanity. Professor of psychiatry Thomas Szasz contends,
one of Freud's most powerful motives in life was the desire to inflict vengeance on Christianity for its alleged traditional antisemitism.
Like Freud, occult psychologist Carl Jung resented historic Christianity and especially its God. For him it was only a myth sought after by neurotics.
All neurotics seek the religious, all talk of God is mythological, and therefore, the Protestant theologian should abandon his alleged knowledge of God through faith and admit to the layman that he is mythologizing.
Jung saw biblical Christianity as hollow, irrelevant, and harmful. He regarded the church as a place of
not life, but death.
More than once he said,
"They would have burned me as a heretic in the Middle Ages."
Perhaps the most respected leader of humanistic psychology was the late Carl Rogers. He observes that he was raised as a Christian but that after 50 years as a psychologist his personal belief system
is now almost the antithesis of what I was taught and believed in my youth. He became a leader in humanism and eventually turned to mysticism, spiritism, and the occult, which he hoped would be incorporated into our educational system.
Atheist Albert Ellis is the founder of the highly popular rational emotive system of psychotherapy. He is convinced that
all true believers in any kind of religious orthodoxy are distinctly disturbed, since they are obviously rigid, fanatic, and dependent individuals. He even argues that devout belief, dogmatism, and religiosity distinctly contribute to, and in some ways are equal to, mental or emotional disturbance.
However, we must wonder if the shoe isn't actually on the other foot. For example, famous existential psychologist Rollo may once observed the following about atheists.
I have been startled by the fact that practically every genuine atheist with whom I have dealt has exhibited unmistakable neurotic tendencies. How do we account for this curious fact?
The attitudes and beliefs of Freud, Jung, Rogers, and Ellis are repeated almost endlessly within modern psychology. As psychology critic Dr. Ed Bulkley points out,
Carl Jung, Erich Fromm, and most of Freud's other successors carried the same fanatical hatred of religion that Freud revealed in his writings. These men are fairly representative of the general attitude, which psychologists have of scriptural authority and validity. Literally, thousands of branches of psychotherapies have sprung from these early roots, which grew from the seeds of rebellion toward God.
indeed, their fruit is evident all about us. Nor do such biases stay out of therapy. Psychiatrist Robert H. Humphreys argues,
The therapist's beliefs may exert a subtle and potentially destructive effect on the patient in psychotherapy, even when the therapist is avowedly neutral in matters of religion.
even psychological testing frequently has a bias against the Christian faith. For example, the Rorschach ink blot test generally scores religious symbols as abnormal. In Rorschach interpretation, advanced technique, the authors assert,
Religion contents are virtually never present in the records of normals. Religion responses are most common among schizophrenics, particularly patients with delusions which concern religion.
regrettably today, for millions of people, psychology has become a major factor in their rejection of Christianity. One wonders if it could be otherwise given the philosophical premises of psychology and the antagonistic attitudes of the leading founders and modern giants in the profession, all of whom are required reading for psychology students. Isn't modern psychology composed largely of materialists, rationalists, skeptics, atheists, humanists, occultists, and New Age promoters of Eastern religion? Yet the study of the mind is hardly anti-Christian by definition. Modern psychology's premises force it to an anti-Christian position in both philosophical and practical matters. As Associate Professor of Educational Psychology at Boston College, William Kirk Kilpatrick states in Psychological Seduction,
Psychology and religion are competing faiths. If you seriously hold to one set of values, you will logically have to reject the other.
perhaps this explains why psychiatrist Thomas Zaz observes in The Myth of Psychotherapy that the
implacable resolve of psychotherapy is to rob religion of as much as it can, and to destroy what it cannot.
What is most surprising of all is to observe who is at the forefront of integrating psychology and Christianity: evangelical psychologists.
It is amazing to me that the most dedicated proponents of integrating these two opposing worldviews are Christians. The most ardent defenders of psychological counseling are Christian therapists, while the most credible critics of psychotherapy are secular psychologists and psychiatrists who have seen the damage their own systems have produced.
When Christian scholars drink deeply from wells of thought that are anti-Christian, and then bring these concepts into the church, it should surprise no one that a controversy might erupt.